Hey everybody, it's time for our next episode of Cat Shorts, taking a look at big ideas of the Christian faith in small packages, using Martin Luther's small catechism as a guide for short videos, so hence the title Cat Shorts. I'm here coming to you from the world's most comfortable chair ever. The world's most comfortable chair, in case you didn't know, is found up in the youth room of New Life Lutheran Church outside of Greater Metropolitan Marion Center. And I've got for you another commandment for us to take a look at today. So grab your 16th century reformer's hat if you've got one. Our older brother in the faith steers us in this direction as we take a look at what's here called the second commandment. You shall not make wrongful use of the name of the Lord your God. Okay? And what does this mean? Our older brother in the faith says we are to fear and love God so that we do not curse, swear, practice magic, lie, or deceive using God's name, but instead use that very name in time of need to call on, pray to, praise, and give thanks to God. All right, I want us to talk about just a couple of quick things here. First of all, our older brother in the faith, Martin Luther, is smart. Smart on a couple of points. One, instead of just saying, we're supposed to love God the most, Luther asked the question, what does it look like to actually love God? If I just say I love you, another person, we usually mean just something kind of like weird and vaguely emotional. But for most of Christian history, people have thought about love as something that you express in actions, in words, not just in sort of like feelings in your heart as we imagine them to be, or endorphins in your brain. So what Luther sees is all the commandments are ways of loving God and loving our neighbor. What does it actually look like to love someone? What does it actually look like to love your neighbor? What does it look like to love God? And so here, Luther turns our direction to how we use God's name. Not like it's magic, not like saying God, or for that matter, using the old Hebrew Yahweh, as we think it might have been pronounced in Hebrew, or for that name using the title Jesus or Jesus Christ. These are not magic words, and just to invoke God doesn't automatically make things happen that you want to have happen. That's sort of treating God like God is our genie, like God is simply a bit of magic, and if we master the wording right, the powers of the Almighty are at our disposal. That ain't how it works, our older brother in the faith, Martin Luther, says. And to think just basically in terms of how do you care about the names and the way you use the names of other people that you care about? You don't go dragging them in the mud. You don't go invoking other people's names as threats. You don't, sully other people's names by just making random accusations or saying that they'll be upset if they're not really going to be upset about something, or that they like something if they wouldn't really like it. Luther's point is, be careful how you use God's name, at least as much as you would care about the way you use, say, your grandmother's name. If you don't want people going around dragging your grandma's reputation in the mud somewhere, don't do the same kind of thing with God's talk. This means that the commandment isn't so much about using potty words or language that would get bleeped on television, and more, it's about what kind of claims do we make about God, and when do we claim to speak for God that we don't really have authority to. It seems like there are lots of folks these days who are sure they've heard a word from God and are absolutely certain that they've heard a definitive word, even if it flies in the face of what other folks are convinced they've heard from God. Or sometimes people will say things like, I'm sure God is sending this or that disaster on you as punishment for X or Y or Z thing. Luther, I think, would caution us and say, you better be real careful before you start invoking God's authority when God didn't give you that kind of authority. This commandment is less about saying bad words and more about how we use the good word of God's name. And to treat God like a person with at least as much respect and dignity and love as you would for somebody else who you love. To say, well, maybe I should treat God's name that same way, with reverence and with care, and not as a threat or a magic potion. So many times we try and use, especially we religious people, use God talk either to make other people afraid of things that we want them to be afraid of, to follow rules that we want to give them, or to make it seem like we've got more authority than we really have. And this commandment says, how about don't do that? Don't wrongly use God's name, and instead, when you need to give your opinion or your belief about something, say it, but you don't have to back it up with, and God told me X or Y or Z. we don't get that kind of authority, and it's okay that we don't get that kind of authority. And also, we don't get to use God's name as a genie or a magic spell or magic charm. So, be mindful about how we use God's name, and do use God's name in ways that are right for the relationship. So just like it's right and good for you to call your best friend by their name when you're going to ask them for a favor or tell them about your day, call on God's name when you're calling on God, when you're talking to God, when you're telling other people about God's goodness and about God's love. But keep in mind, it's all about how we use God's name and what things we get to claim God's authority for and what things we shouldn't. Join us next time for more adventures walking through the Christian faith with big ideas here on Cat Shorts. Bye.